The tension in the air was palpable as I set the dinner table, my hands trembling slightly. Mitchell had been distant for weeks, his mind seemingly occupied by matters far beyond the confines of our suburban home. I knew I needed to confront him, to demand answers, but the fear of his indifferent reaction kept me from broaching the subject. As Mitchell sauntered into the dining room, I took a deep breath and steeled myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quivering with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Mitchell paused, his brow furrowing in feigned concern. "What is it, dear?" he asked, settling into his chair. I forced myself to meet his gaze, searching for any semblance of the man I had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Your behavior, Mitchell. The long hours at the office, the sudden business trips. I'm not blind. I know something is going on." He scoffed, picking up his fork and stabbing at his food. "You're being ridiculous, Alara. I'm simply working hard to provide for this family." "Provide?" I scoffed, my fingers curling into fists on the table. "You're barely here, Mitchell. Dylan needs you, and I—" My voice trailed off as the weight of my words threatened to overwhelm me. Mitchell's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Don't be so dramatic. I'm doing the best I can. If you have a problem with that, then perhaps you should reconsider your priorities." I felt my heart constrict, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp exhale. "My priorities? Mitchell, this is our family we're talking about. Don't you care about us anymore?" He rolled his eyes, the nonchalance in his gesture like a knife to my chest. "Of course I care, Alara. But I have responsibilities outside of this house, responsibilities that you seem to have a hard time understanding." "Responsibilities?" I spat, the anger rising within me. "What about your responsibility to your son? To me? We're your family, Mitchell, and we're falling apart. Can't you see that?" Mitchell's fork clattered against his plate as he slammed it down, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor as he stood abruptly. "I don't have time for this melodrama. I'm going to the office. We'll continue this discussion another time." "Mitchell, wait," I cried, but he had already stormed out, the front door slamming behind him. I sat there, trembling, my appetite forgotten. The facade of our once happy family had finally crumbled, and I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. As I cleared the table, my mind raced with 1,000 unanswered questions. What was Mitchell hiding? Where was he really going? And how could I protect Dylan from the fallout of our disintegrating marriage? I made my way upstairs, pausing outside Dylan's door. I could hear the faint sounds of his music, a bitter-sweet melody that seemed to reflect the heaviness in my heart. Knocking softly, I pushed the door open to find him hunched over his homework, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Dylan?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Mom, is everything okay?" I moved to sit on the edge of his bed, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I'm not sure, honey. Your father and we had another fight." Dylan's expression shifted, a flash of understanding crossing his features. "It's about him being gone all the time, isn't it?" I nodded, my throat suddenly tight with emotion. "I'm worried, Dylan. I feel like I'm losing him, and I don't know what to do." Dylan reached out, his hand covering mine in a gesture of reassurance. "I'm here, Mom. We'll figure this out together." In that moment, I saw the strength and resilience in my son's eyes, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them side by side. With Dylan by my side, I felt a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to engulf us. I didn't sleep a wink that night, my mind consumed by the tense exchange with Mitchell. As the first rays of dawn crept through my bedroom curtains, I decided I needed answers. Slipping out of bed, I made my way downstairs to Mitchell's study, determined to uncover the truth. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers trailing over the ornate door handle. Was I really prepared to invade his privacy? But the gnawing need to understand his behavior outweighed my reservations. Quietly, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was eerily silent, save for the gentle hum of the computer monitor. I approached the desk, my eyes scanning the various documents and files scattered across the surface. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until I noticed a small notepad tucked away in the corner. Picking it up, I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. Scrawled across the pages were a series of names and numbers. Phone numbers, it seemed. As I traced the digits with my fingertip, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. These weren't business contacts. They were personal. I was about to replace the notepad when the sound of a door creaking behind me made me freeze. Whirling around, I found Dylan standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mom, what are you doing in here?" he whispered, his gaze shifting to the notepad in my hands. I hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Should I involve Dylan in this? But the urgency of the situation compelled me to speak. "Dylan, I think your father is having an affair." Dylan's expression crumpled, his shoulders sagging under the weight of my words. "No, that can't be true," he murmured, his voice trembling. I crossed the room, enveloping him in a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, honey. I wish I could say otherwise, but the evidence is right here." I held out the notepad, my hands shaking. Dylan took it, his eyes scanning the pages with a growing sense of disbelief. This can't be happening," he choked out, his fingers clenching around the notepad. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, my heart aching for the pain I knew he was experiencing. "I'm so sorry, Dylan. I wish I could take this away from you, but I think we need to confront your father about this." Dylan's gaze snapped up, a fierce determination blazing in his eyes. "Yes, we do. We need to find out the truth, no matter how painful it may be." I nodded, a surge of pride swelling in my chest. "All right, then. Let's do this, together." With renewed resolve, we made our way downstairs, the notepad clutched tightly in Dylan's hand. We didn't have to wait long before Mitchell returned home, his expression shifting from surprise to unease as he took in our somber demeanors. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice guarded. Dylan stepped forward, his chin held high. "Dad, we know about your affair." Mitchell's face drained of color, his eyes darting between Dylan and me. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, his facade of composure crumbling. "Don't play dumb with us, Mitchell," I interjected, my voice laced with barely contained anger. "We have proof." Dylan held up the notepad, his hand trembling. Mitchell's eyes narrowed, his expression shifting from shock to defensive fury. "How dare you invade my privacy? This is none of your business." "None of our business?" Dylan cried, his words dripping with contempt. "You're our father, and you've betrayed this family. That makes it our business." Mitchell opened his mouth to retort, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. For once, he was rendered speechless, the weight of his deception bearing down on him. In that moment, I knew our lives would never be the same again. The fractured facade of our family had finally crumbled, and the consequences of Mitchell's actions would forever alter the course of our lives. The days that followed our confrontation with Mitchell were a blur of emotions and adrenaline. Dylan and I knew we couldn't simply confront him and expect him to capitulate. We needed concrete evidence to build a case against him. Night after night, we pored over the contents of the notepad, painstakingly documenting every name, number, and location. I felt a sickening sense of dread with each new discovery, but I pushed forward, determined to uncover the full extent of Mitchell's betrayal. "This has to be enough," Dylan said one evening, his brow furrowed in concentration as he scanned the pages before us. "We need to make him pay for what he's done." I reached across the table, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "I know, honey, but we have to be careful. We can't let our emotions cloud our judgment." My gaze hardened as I spoke, the weight of our mission settling heavily on my shoulders. Dylan nodded, his expression resolute. "Okay, so what's our next move?" I took a deep breath, laying out our plan of action. "First, we need to confront Mitchell again, this time with the evidence we've gathered. We need to make it clear that we're not backing down." Dylan's eyes narrowed, a spark of determination igniting within them. "And then?" "Then we'll need to speak with a lawyer," I said, my voice laced with conviction. "We're going to file for divorce, and we're going to make sure Mitchell pays for his betrayal, both emotionally and financially." The words hung in the air, the gravity of our decision weighing heavily upon us. But the alternative, staying and enduring Mitchell's deceit, was simply unacceptable. Over the next few days, we meticulously organized our evidence, compiling a dossier that would leave no doubt in Mitchell's mind about the severity of his actions. When the time came to confront him, we were ready. Mitchell strode through the front door, his expression one of practiced indifference. But the moment he saw Dylan and me seated at the kitchen table, his mask began to slip. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of trepidation. I stood, the dossier clutched in my hands. "We need to talk, Mitchell, about your affair." His eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed to lose his composure. But just as quickly the arrogance returned, his chin lifting in defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about," he spat, his gaze darting between Dylan and me. "Don't insult our intelligence, Mitchell," Dylan interjected, his voice dripping with contempt. "We have proof, overwhelming proof. I opened the dossier, spreading the pages across the table. Phone records, receipts, hotel bookings. We have it all, Mitchell. Your affair is no longer a secret. Mitchell's face contorted with a mix of anger and panic, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. This is an outrage. How dare you invade my privacy like this? Your privacy? I scoffed, the fury in my voice barely contained. What about our family, Mitchell? What about the vows you made to me, to Dylan? You've betrayed us all and we won't stand for it. Mitchell's eyes darted around the room, his composure crumbling. I don't know what to say, he stammered, his bravado fading. That's just it, Mitchell, Dylan said, his voice soft yet laced with steel. There's nothing you can say. The damage is done, and we're going to make sure you pay for it. With those words, the storm that had been brewing finally broke, and the future of our family hung in the balance. The air in the room crackled with tension as Mitchell stared at the damning evidence laid out before him. His face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic, and I could see the cogs turning in his mind as he desperately searched for a way to salvage the situation. This is preposterous, he spat, his fingers trembling as he swept the papers aside. You have no right to go through my personal belongings like this. I stood my ground, my gaze unwavering. We have every right, Mitchell. You've betrayed this family, and we're not going to let you get away with it. Mitchell's eyes narrowed, his lips twisting into a sneer. Betrayed the family? Don't be so melodramatic, Alara. This is my private life, and it has nothing to do with you or Dylan. Dylan stepped forward, his posture rigid with barely contained fury. Nothing to do with us? He spat, his voice trembling. You're our father, Mitchell. Your actions have destroyed this family. Mitchell scoffed, his arrogance a sharp contrast to the evidence that surrounded him. Destroyed the family? Don't be so dramatic, Dylan. This is just a minor indiscretion. It doesn't have to change anything. The words were barely out of his mouth when I felt the sting of anger surge through me. Doesn't have to change anything? I practically shouted, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. You've betrayed us, Mitchell, and you expect us to just accept it? Mitchell's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he glared at me. Accept it? You're being ridiculous, Alara. I'm the one who provides for this family, who keeps a roof over your head. You should be grateful, not making unreasonable demands. Dylan stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen in him before. Grateful? You think we should be grateful that you've been unfaithful to Mom, that you've broken your vows and destroyed our trust? Mitchell's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, his hands outstretched as if to grab Dylan. How dare you speak to me that way, you ungrateful brat? I stepped between them, my body shielding Dylan from Mitchell's onslaught. Don't you dare touch him, Mitchell, I growled, my voice laced with a dangerous edge. Mitchell's hands fell to his sides, his chest heaving with labored breaths. This is my house, my family. I won't be dictated to by you or that child. This is no longer your family, Mitchell, I said, my voice low and steady. You've made sure of that. Now, I want you out, now. Mitchell's eyes widened, disbelief written across his features. You can't be serious. This is my home, my life. You can't just throw me out. Oh, but we can, Dylan interjected, his voice dripping with contempt. And we will. We have the evidence to prove your infidelity, and that means we hold all the power now. Mitchell's face drained of color, the realization of his predicament finally sinking in. You? He sputtered, his words failing him. We're going to make sure you pay for what you've done, Mitchell, I said, my gaze unwavering. You won't get away with this, I promise you that. With those words, the confrontation reached its climax, and the future of our family hung in the balance. The storm had broken, and now it was time to weather the aftermath. In the aftermath of our confrontation with Mitchell, Dylan and I wasted no time in seeking legal counsel. We knew that the road ahead would be arduous, but we were determined to ensure that Mitchell would pay for his betrayal, both emotionally and financially. As we sat across from the seasoned family lawyer, her sharp gaze scrutinizing the evidence we had gathered, a glint of admiration flickered in her eyes. You two have certainly done your homework, she said, her fingers leafing through the pages of our carefully compiled dossier. This should give us a strong case for a highly favorable settlement. I felt a surge of relief wash over me, but it was quickly tempered by the gravity of the situation. What can we expect exactly? I asked, my voice tinged with apprehension. The lawyer leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Well, given the overwhelming evidence of Mitchell's infidelity, we should be able to secure full custody of Dylan, as well as a significant alimony and child support package. Dylan's eyes widened, and I could see the flicker of hope in his gaze. So, Mom won't have to worry about money anymore? He asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. The lawyer offered him a reassuring smile. That's correct, Dylan. We'll make sure your father is held accountable for his actions, both in terms of providing for you and your mother, as well as the emotional toll his betrayal has taken on your family. I reached across the table, squeezing Dylan's hand in a gesture of gratitude and reassurance. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We're ready to do whatever it takes to ensure justice is served. The lawyer nodded, her expression turning serious. Very well. We'll need to move quickly, as Mitchell will no doubt try to undermine our efforts. Are you both prepared for what lies ahead? Dylan and I exchanged a resolute glance, our determination shining through. We're ready, I said, my voice unwavering. And so the legal battle began. Mitchell, sensing the gravity of the situation, unleashed a barrage of threats and intimidation tactics, but we remained steadfast in our pursuit of justice. With the lawyer's guidance, we navigated the complex legal landscape, leveraging every piece of evidence we had gathered to our advantage. As the proceedings unfolded, Mitchell's facade of control slowly crumbled. His arrogance gave way to desperation, and his efforts to undermine our case only served to further strengthen our position. In the end, the court ruled in our favor, granting me full custody of Dylan and a substantial alimony and child support package. Mitchell's humiliation was complete, his professional reputation tarnished by the revelation of his unethical behavior. As we walked out of the courthouse, Dylan's hand firmly clasped in mine, I felt a surge of pride and relief wash over me. We had weathered the storm and emerged victorious. Mitchell's reign of deceit had finally come to an end, and we were now free to build a new life, unburdened by his toxic influence. We did it, Mom, Dylan whispered, his eyes shining with a mix of triumph and gratitude. I pulled him into a tight embrace, my heart overflowing with love and pride. Yes, we did, Dylan, and now our future is our own. As we made our way to our new home, a sense of hope and renewal filled the air. The veil of deceit had been lifted, and our journey towards a brighter tomorrow had only just begun. The days following our legal victory against Mitchell were a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt a profound sense of relief and vindication, knowing that we had finally broken free from his deception and manipulation. But on the other, the reality of our new circumstances weighed heavily on my mind. Dylan, bless his heart, had taken the changes in stride, his focus now firmly on his studies and building a brighter future for himself. But I couldn't help but worry about the long-term impact this upheaval would have on him. As for Mitchell, he was a far cry from the composed and confident man he had once been. His arrogance had been shattered, and in its place, a desperate, vicious creature had emerged. It started with the constant barrage of phone calls, each one more hostile and threatening than the last. Mitchell would demand to see Dylan, to talk some sense into him, his words laced with a venom that made my skin crawl. You can't keep me from my own son, Alara, he would seethe, his voice practically dripping with rage. I have rights, and I'll be damned if you take that away from me. I would listen, my grip on the receiver tightening with each passing second, before firmly informing him that any further attempts at contact would result in legal action. Each time he would sputter and curse, but ultimately back down, if only for a moment. Then the letters started arriving. Scathing missives filled with accusations and veiled threats, all designed to undermine my resolve and Dylan's newfound sense of security. I would read them, my hands trembling, before handing them over to our lawyer, who assured me that we had nothing to fear. He's just lashing out, Alara, she would say, her expression reassuring. This is all part of his desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, but as long as we remain vigilant and steadfast, he won't be able to do anything to jeopardize the settlement. Still, the tension in our household was palpable, and I could see the toll it was taking on Dylan. His once vibrant spirit had dimmed, his laughter and carefree smiles replaced by a guarded, almost weary demeanor. I'm sorry, Mom, he would say, his gaze cast downward. I know this is all my fault. Dylan, no, I would instantly interject, gathering him into a tight embrace. This is in no way your fault. Your father's actions are his own, and we're the ones who are paying the price. But I promise you, we'll get through this. Together. Despite my reassurances, I couldn't help but worry that the damage had already been done. Mitchell's bitter campaign of harassment and intimidation was taking its toll, and I feared that the lasting scars might prove too deep to heal. But even in the face of this adversity, I remained determined. I would not let Mitchell break us, not after we had fought so hard to reclaim our lives. We would weather this storm, just as we had weathered the one that came before. As I held Dylan close, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my own, I knew that our bond would be the anchor that kept us grounded, no matter how turbulent the waters ahead. The days leading up to the final court hearing were tense and nerve-wracking, with Mitchell's relentless attempts to undermine our case only serving to reinforce our determination. But with our meticulously gathered evidence and the unwavering support of our lawyer, we were confident that justice would prevail. As we stepped into the courtroom, the air crackled with anticipation. Mitchell, his once confident demeanor now tinged with a desperate edge, glared at us from across the aisle. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed facade was about to come crashing down. The proceedings began, and our lawyer methodically presented the damning evidence we had accumulated. Mitchell's infidelity, his financial impropriety, and his blatant disregard for our family, it all laid bare for the judge to see. Mitchell, in a last-ditch attempt to salvage his position, tried to discredit the evidence, accusing us of fabricating the documents. But the judge, a weathered and experienced individual, saw through his lies with ease. "The evidence presented here is overwhelming, Mr. Blackwood," the judge stated, his voice stern and uncompromising. "Your actions have not only betrayed your family, but they have also undermined the very fabric of this marriage. I see no reason to rule in your favor." Mitchell's face drained of color, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "This is an outrage," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You can't do this to me." The judge's gavel came down with a resounding thud, silencing Mitchell's outburst. "I will not tolerate such outbursts in my courtroom, Mr. Blackwood. You will accept the ruling or face further consequences." Mitchell's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing with a malicious fury. But he knew better than to defy the judge's order, and he slumped back into his seat, his defeat written all over his face. The judge then turned his attention to me, his expression softening. "Mrs. Blackwood, the court has reviewed the evidence and has determined that you should be granted full custody of your son, as well as a substantial alimony and child support package." I felt the air leave my lungs in a relieved sigh, my hands trembling as I reached for Dylan's. "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. The judge nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You and your son have been through a great ordeal, and I commend you for your resilience and determination. May this ruling bring you the justice and closure you deserve." As the gavel came down one final time, signaling the end of the proceedings, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had won, and Mitchell's reign of deceit had finally come to an end. But the true triumph lay in the way our family had emerged from this crisis, stronger, more united, and ready to embrace a future free from the chains of Mitchell's betrayal. As we left the courthouse, Dylan's hand firmly in mine, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of pride and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and now the path ahead was ours to forge, unhindered by the shadows of the past. As the final gavel fell in the courtroom, signaling the end of our long and arduous battle against Mitchell, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotional turmoil, but we had emerged victorious, our family finally free from the shackles of Mitchell's deceit. Dylan, standing beside me with his head held high, exuded a confidence that I hadn't seen in him for far too long. The weight of our ordeal had aged him beyond his years, but in his eyes I could see a glimmer of hope and determination that filled me with immense pride. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're finally free." I pulled him into a tight embrace, savoring the warmth of his familiar scent. "Yes, we did, Dylan. And now the future is ours to shape." As we made our way out of the courthouse, I couldn't help but steal a glance back at Mitchell, who sat hunched in his chair, his expression one of utter defeat. His mistress, the woman he had so callously betrayed our family for, had already abandoned him, her loyalty as fleeting as the lies he had spun. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the knowledge that Mitchell had brought this upon himself. He had chosen to forsake his family, his integrity, and now he was reaping the consequences of his actions. In the days that followed, we began the process of rebuilding our lives. With the substantial alimony and child support package secured, I was able to secure a fulfilling job that provided not only financial stability, but a sense of purpose and independence. Dylan, too, seemed to thrive in the newfound freedom. He excelled in his studies, his grades soaring as he poured his energy into shaping a future unburdened by the weight of his father's betrayal. I watched with a proud heart as he blossomed, his social circles expanding, and a renewed sense of confidence radiating from him. One evening, as we sat together in our cozy new home, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey we had undertaken. The pain, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, it had all seemed so overwhelming in the moment. But now, with the dust settled and a new chapter unfolding before us, I realized that we had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and more closely bonded than ever before. "Mom," Dylan said, his voice soft but filled with conviction, "I know the past few months have been hell, but I want you to know that I'm grateful. Grateful for your strength, your determination, and your unwavering love. Without you, I don't know where we'd be." I felt the sting of tears in my eyes as I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. "Oh, Dylan, you don't need to thank me. You are my world, and I will always be here for you, no matter what. We're in this together, now and forever." As we moved into our new home, a sense of optimism and possibility filled the air. The veil of deceit had been lifted, and the future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now glimmered with the promise of a fresh start, one where our family could heal, grow, and thrive, unencumbered by the shadows of the past.